Thanks for waiting. Sorry I'm a little bit late. But I'm so excited for today's show, only because there's a couple rants that are gonna happen. Let's turn this guy off. What's up, Kartik? Look at this, that bookshelf right there. It's finally going away today. I'm super excited about that. Let's give it a couple more minutes for people to come in, join up. I was concerned that the sun was going to be shitty today, but it's not. Thank goodness for shade. Okay, let's check my levels. Get this recording ready to go. No, I'm not recording a movie. What's up, Mad Hatter? All right. Everybody ready? What's up, Thomas? Here we go, here we go, here we go. Thanks, man. I'm gonna keep doing it. Can't stop, won't stop. Today, we talk why restaurants fail, Drake's new restaurant. I can't believe that's a thing. My thoughts on that 42 Grams documentary, a new YouTube channel I'm actually a pretty huge fan of lately, eating out at restaurants alone, and one of my favorite pastry shops is going international. Welcome back to the show, folks. My name's Justin Khanna, and this is episode 52 of The Emulsion. If you're new here, this is a show where I talk all about the news stories and industry happenings that matter to me as I'm navigating my own career as a professional chef. I gotta give a shout out to our sponsor first, you guys, at least the ones of you that are generous enough to support me on Patreon. Starts as little as $1 a month, and it doesn't seem like a lot, but it really does help me get closer to doing this internet thing full time. So if you want to sponsor this show, you can do so for just $1 on patreon.com/Justin Khanna. I would really appreciate it. I have one more second personal plug here if you're interested in signing up for my bi-weekly newsletter. The next one will be coming out either, I'm thinking Monday is going to be the day that I send these out. I include discounted gear that I find or get offered, articles that I'm enjoying or have covered here on the show, new videos that I've released, inspiration for you either through videos or quotes or photos or new dish ideas. It's all included as kind of a way for me to bring value into your inbox. I'm not wanting it to be spammy at all. I just want it to be filled with great stuff every single time you get a little notification from me. So if you want to sign up for that, go ahead and check out justinkhanna.com/newsletter and you can take it from there. Today's beverage, I have two beverages actually. I have my water bottle there, which I probably should be drinking, but I did just brew a my afternoon cup of, can you see it? There's a J on it. Anna got me this a long time ago. For those of you watching the show for a long time, you know this mug. But it is some Four Sigmatic mushroom coffee in there is what I'm currently drinking. It's my preferred, only because I don't have to brew another cup of coffee. It is like powder, so you just need hot water. And it also is less caffeine. I'm almost positive it's less caffeine than a normal cup of coffee. It's a little bit earthier, and it just kind of makes sure that my afternoon can be more productive than a kind of stir-crazy latte kind of caffeine jolt. But first story today comes from Foodable Network. Have any of you guys heard of that before? Foodable Network is a site that I've never heard of before, but Andrew Carlson is the author of this article. He just published an article called, quote, "The #1 reason why restaurants fail and what to do about it," end quote. So I personally anticipated this to be kind of like a statistical study, some numbers, which you guys know I love covering, or like a breakdown of industry trends and some predictions for what's to happen. But it's essentially a motivational style piece. And after doing some digging into the author, this Andrew Carlson guy, he is a speaker / coach. So this totally makes sense why he wrote this way. No offense at all. But if you own or if you manage a restaurant and you're having problems, I wouldn't advise you not to read this, if that makes sense. And spoiler alert, the 3 things that he wants you to take away is 1, have systems, 2, fix your mindset, and 3, make sure you're executing on your vision. So I can't hate on this, right? Because it's seriously the advice that I would give too. And it's something that I'm keeping in my mind every single day as I think about my own projects and my own ambitions. It's one of the reasons why I stopped trying to be something that I'm not, right? I really thought that I could crush the kind of local Pacific Northwest inspired game being here in Seattle, but it turns out it's not a vision that I'm excited about, and I don't truly love Pacific Northwest food. One, because no one really knows what Pacific Northwest food is, and two, I'm super quick to poke holes in other chefs or other people's philosophies. So if you aren't 100% behind it, the vision that you've set for yourself, then your mindset starts to dissolve, and then it's completely over. So I felt bad when I personally helped bring on someone from India to the restaurant in Norway because he was interested in learning about Scandinavian food. He did a stage at Noma. He was like, seemed super interested, but then he had zero interest in the vision for the restaurant, which was to execute on Norwegian West Coast food. And he ended up leaving the restaurant because of it. So a lot of this article is heavy on the motivation. You're not going to find a lot of statistics here. It's a lot of exaggerated, very quotable sentences. So if you need a hit of that, it definitely hit up that article. It's linked up in the show notes. But overall, I think it should serve more as a framework for you than an actual reading piece. So, some easily answerable questions for you if and when you start your own thing, right? Like, you should have these ready to go. What is your vision? What were the other two? What are your systems? And what is, like, is your mindset okay to do this? That to me is more important than anything else. And that's why I'm saying that you should be able to answer these questions if and when you start your own thing. So with this channel, my personal brand, the vision is to help the next generation. I'm sick and tired of hearing about chefs say that there's no good talent or strong cooks are hard to find. I'm putting it out there. I am a better line cook than you. I will say it straight up here. If you put me on the line, me versus you, I will be putting out better food, cleaner, and more effectively than you after 2 weeks. I'm just confident as shit that that is my strength. So I'm taking this time out in my career to give back. I want to share what I do, what I know, not because I'm sitting on a pedestal and I'm holier than thou, but because I used to get sent home. I used to be not good. I was so insecure that I had all these Michelin stars on my resume and I couldn't really cook on a line. So I know how that feels, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So all the videos, this podcast is all to help you, to inspire you, to teach you. That's the vision. And it took me a long time to figure that out. And the mindset thing, moving on to his second point, is all you, right? Like, I could literally come to your restaurant and coach you, but if you're like that Indian guy that I was talking about and you don't get excited about the food, or if you're in it for the wrong reasons, or if you've given up in your own head, it's not going to work, right? Like, for me, I meditate daily. I use Headspace. As someone who wasn't a fan at all of the idea of meditation, I'm good. I'm serious. I was seriously skeptical when I started to meditate, but it takes about a month for you to start to see the value in what your subconscious has on your mental health and your performance. Another hack that I actually include in this show, just to get it out is to get out of the industry every once in a while. It's one of the reasons why I include that story at the end, to give you something outside of your prep list or sous chef drama or server issues and all of that, and just come to grips with the fact that it's just food, right? Like, I know it pays your bills. I know it doesn't change how people react or how people treat you. But if you can get to that higher place where you just see that it's just food, then it helps a lot. I also apologize if I'm getting really kind of like empathetic and emotionally involved right now. It's just, I watched the 42 Grams documentary on Netflix with my girlfriend this week, and I'm seriously like super depressed about it. I'll definitely get to that in a second, but I want to finish this up. What was the last one? Systems. So systems are one of the reasons why I think I'm a better line cook than you. It's just one of the reasons that I think my prep list video is so important. And when the article is talking about systems, it means, quote, when you create strong systems, your business flourishes because you don't have to worry about whether or not something is getting done. So for me, a system that I've been doing for the past 2 weeks is to use a combo of Google Sheets and Trello for all my videos. It allows me to forecast. I have a checklist that goes along with every video to make sure everything is linked up properly. And what this means for you, how do you create systems in your own work? It's a principle that I definitely covered in that prep list video that I mentioned. If you want to find it, just search Justin Khanna prep list on YouTube and you'll find it. But how do you automate, right? Like, how do you create consistency, or how do you create foolproof workarounds to creatively solve problems? That's what you should be thinking about. And it's one of the shitty parts about this article. It's super clickbaity and there's not a ton of meat in it. Like I said, it's just a bunch of very quotable sentences. But I wanted to give you some examples so you can apply this idea in your own life. A system that I did at the restaurant in Norway was, what we used to do at the end of the night was to have the sous chef, who was me, sit at the pass with the laptop with an open email to the produce company, and everyone just kind of shouted out their orders, right? Like, I need 3 kilos of carrots and 2 bunches of watercress, whatever. And after a ton of issues with people either forgetting to order things or last minute add-ons, I said no more. And I hung hooks on the wall with clipboards, and all the guys and girls on the line were responsible for writing their own orders on these spreadsheets that I made. And if they weren't written down before they clocked out, it wasn't going to show up the next day. And that also made it at least 3 times faster for me to fill out the email, because I was just transcribing, right? I was just transferring from one thing to the other. And it worked. So hopefully, Andrew Carlson, the author of this article, I've taken your reasons that a restaurant fails and turned it into something usable. But, you know, no offense, but I mean, come on, right? So next up, and Thomas is actually commenting on this right now. I teased it already, 42 grams. Let's talk about it. So for those of you that don't know, there is a documentary out on Netflix about this restaurant that got 2 Michelin stars in its first year opening. They started off as an underground dining concept in Chicago called Sous Rising. S-O-U-S, Rising. And they got their own brick and mortar space. It is a husband and wife team. It is all about their story through that process. I'm not going to spoil anything for you folks. But I had a hilarious exchange with one of my best friends. We were joking why Chicago chef documentaries are so bad and emotional and always end violently. I mean, we just talked about Grace closing, so I have a theory. I'm going to attempt to tackle this. So back in the day, Charlie Trotter, who everyone knows was kind of a nutcase, had this incredibly successful restaurant, right? And his food was ambitious, but he was a horrible, horrible manager. And that style of restaurant attracts a certain type of person, right? Like, I mean, I even felt super compelled at the end of 42 Grams documentary to open up a fine dining spot. The idea of changing the game is attractive, and I have no doubt that you are just like me, and when someone tells you that you can't do something, it makes you want to do it even more. And I'm not blaming all of this on Charlie Trotter, but there's no denying that culture is still very much so that way in Chicago today. It is still abusive in some places. It is passive aggressive. There are pushy restaurants. That's kind of like the norm, like push, push, push. And frankly, it's unsustainable, right? And it's not healthy. And a city that's known for boundary pushing restaurants attracts people that can handle it, and people who even want that abuse, who feel like it's necessary to take those steps in their career. The movie cites this guy who worked for free for Charlie Trotter for a year, which is just crazy. And so it's a cycle that continues, right? And I was a huge fan of his rant on chefs and not being in the restaurant and his desire to be in the space every night. That's something that I also hold very near and dear, so I connected with that. But his management style was just horrendously bad, right? Like, it was just frankly embarrassing to watch. And I feel like only now that all of these stories are coming forward, people are noticing that it's not cool to be that kind of chef. We're finally starting to see being kind become cool. And even after the story that we mentioned last week with all these food critics who are refusing to critique restaurants where either there's a red star on your name, like you've had a sexual harassment allegation or you're not paying your staff, restaurant critics won't review you, and that's just becoming the norm. But it's still going to take some time, right? It's not going to happen overnight, and I do feel like it's going to happen soon. But the other thing that I took away from this movie was the story, right? Chef Jake had zero story to go along with his food. And the flavors look phenomenal, right? His technique was great. He makes great looking food, but he went on so many rants about how he's kind of just putting himself on a plate, in air quotes. And I'm like, dude, is duck, green bean, and umeboshi you? Like, is that you on a plate? And like, just why not just say what it is? Say that you think it sounds good. Say that you think it's a great combination. Say that you copied it from another chef. It's really hard when you have a giant ego to not do that, right? Like, I have a dish coming up on the menu we're doing in 2 weeks called Jose's Pre-Dessert, because I'm literally ripping it off from a friend of mine in Gothenburg, Sweden. And it's the reason why Rene Redzepi wins. It's because Noma has a story to tell, right? Favakin's the same thing, and Central in Peru. And it's all these places have something to say. And these chefs that learn techniques at Michelin-starred places and have an insane skill set, like their execution is beyond belief, but when it comes down to putting your name on something, it's really hard to figure out what you want to say. And because a lot of this is this kind of Frankenstein of what you've learned over the past 10 years. You kind of combine all these techniques from all these restaurants. And the problem is, a lot of people get to the end of these movies or this stage and they get it in their head that they're smart enough to do it differently, right? To have a standalone fine dining restaurant and be successful. And I'm not talking about Michelin stars. I'm talking about like real success, like having a sustainable work environment and healthy profit margins and happy people and happy guests. That's hard, right? That's really, really hard. And Grace showed me that my experience at Grace showed me, this documentary showed me that Michelin is not hard. And I'm going to say it again, Michelin, is not hard. It is easy to do pretty food, to design a nice dining room, to buy nice silverware, to hire a bunch of ambitious people at minimum wage, execute for 24 months, and you've got multiple stars, right? Like, there's a clear blueprint for that. It's happened before. And the problem is, if that's your goal, if you start off with doing something to prove to whoever it is that you're trying to prove wrong, that you'll get there after 3 years, and then you'll realize that you still have 40 years left of your career. And that's when the problems happen. That's when stuff starts to go south. So it's why I'm not going for a standalone fine dining spot. I'm very much so in that place now. I've stopped saying local because I get produce from Mexico sometimes. It's just how it goes. I've stopped saying Pacific Northwest because no one actually knows what Pacific Northwest food is. I'm saying that I'm cooking for fun. I'm cooking to share my ideas, just to cook. I just want to cook. And that's what I want to say right now. And that what I want to say is going to change. It's going to evolve. And it took me a whole year of doing dinners and peacocking around to figure that out. But damn, it's getting real on the show today. Ernesto, I'm not talking shit on food from Mexico. I'm just saying it's not exactly local for someone like me up here in Seattle. So overall, thumbs down for the chef. Thumbs decently high for the documentary itself. It was entertaining. If you're into food and want your own restaurant, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that documentary, but it makes me even that much more motivated to continue creating in the way that I am, because the next generation deserves way better than Jake What's-His-Face. So next, let's take a little more lighthearted story now, shall we? There's this YouTuber from France. His name is Alex. His channel is called Alex French Guy Cooking. And if I had to describe it, it's like if Casey Neistat was French. And I don't even say loved food because I just feel like all French people love food. But he just fools around experimenting with food and machines and equipment. Like, he makes his own knives, and he just did a video where he like bought a pasta machine from China and like took it apart and re-put it together and makes ramen with it. Like, he edits all of his own stuff. He's really good at video editing and telling a story, and his accent's awesome. He's just awesome. I've been really enjoying his hilarious videos. So if you guys want a break from the serious cooking shows out there, definitely check him out. Again, that's Alex French Guy Cooking. You can search it on YouTube. I did send him a DM. I'm trying to get him on as a guest for this podcast, but we will see what happens with that. Next up, I want to talk about Drake's new restaurant in Toronto. Again, like I said in the intro, I can't believe that it's actually a thing, that Drake has a restaurant. Mushroom coffee sip. It is called Pick 6. It is spelled P-I-C-K space the number 6-I-X. And he's got a chef from Montreal running it named Antonio Park. It is a combo of a restaurant, lounge, sports bar, and a restaurant, a lounge, and a sports bar, which is very similar to Jay-Z's spot in New York City. I think it's crazy to hear that there's 178 seats in this space. And as far as how they're going to fill those seats, Chef Park says, quote, "It's something affordable for everyone, and I want to provide for families and couples who wouldn't normally go to a sports bar," end quote. So that means checks at around $50 a person. Drake kind of contributed to the menu. The article says that he told the chef that he likes broccoli, so, quote, "We did a broccoli dish where we blanch it, cover it with Japanese seasonings like nori and miso, and some mizuna, top it with cheese, and then it's finished in the oven," end quote. I don't know if I'd want to eat that. Anyways, while Drizzy is in town, Pick 6 will have a VIP room at the front of the space and a separate private room for Drake in the back. And when Drake isn't around, non-famous guests are allowed to rent out the room. It's an interesting way to quote it like that, non-famous guests. So let's see what happens. There's a lot of diversity in this menu. Quote, "It's 30 items, including the raw bar that does seafood platters, sushi, and sashimi. We're going to have a lot of salads, duck, beef, chicken, and some Korean dishes like braised short ribs. We're doing a simple Ontario beef burger with a spicy gochujang teriyaki sauce finished with provolone. There's a tiradito, which is like a ceviche, but the fish is cut like sashimi rather than in cubes," end quote. And again, back to the stories that we talked about with larger companies getting into the restaurant game, the only way that I see this restaurant actually failing is if there's kind of a management vision issue. If Drake doesn't agree with Chef Park, or if Chef Park has to spend 6 months in Montreal and his chef de cuisine has some issues with either guests or with Drake himself, Funding is definitely not a problem with a project like this because once the place is open, it doesn't really matter if it's profitable because Drake isn't in the restaurant game to make money. It is secondary. It's a place for him to go when he's back in Toronto to bring his friends, to hold parties. And I personally see this emerging as a trend. I also don't necessarily see it as a bad thing, and maybe this goes back to the vision thing that we talked about before. If you want to cook and serve people food, maybe it's smart for us chefs to take a secondary seat to these companies that are making big profits in other industries and other avenues, and they see value in what we do as chefs in bringing people together over food. But again, not saying you should just ditch your day job and go work for Sony's new restaurant or whatever happens. It's just something to be aware of as you progress yourself. It's not something that I would have even thought of at the beginning of my career, like, oh, I can be a part of JBL, like JBL wants a restaurant in whatever city they live in, and I can be the chef at that restaurant, and it's a win-win for everyone. Like, that's crazy. But it's something that you can think about as you're moving forward, and just something that made me stop and ponder. So next up, Eater did a interesting profile on dining alone. They actually released 2 articles over the last few days. One is called, quote, How to be an exemplary solo diner, end quote. And the other one is called, quote, How restaurants can make solo dining extraordinary, end quote. And I have to say, it's fantastic to see a topic covered from Eater from 2 different perspectives by 2 different journalists. One of these is from the perspective of giving advice to the diner, and one is giving perspective on advice to the restaurant. So I will spare you some of the details because some of you might just not like eating out alone. I know I have friends who never do it, but I definitely enjoy going out by myself, making friends with the staff. It really lets you focus on the meal. And actually in the second article, Will Gadara from EMP says it perfectly, quote, To build a relationship in the beginning of the meal, you need to enter it on a foundational level of formality. And then you can't become too comfortable with people until they've given us permission to let our guard down. I think with solo diners, that's especially important because maybe we can be their company, end quote. And I am 100% the guy who breaks down the wall immediately and asks that person like where they're from and what they would order and all of that. I love becoming friends with the staff of a restaurant when I go out to eat by myself. But from the first article, How to be a Good Solo Diner, I'm going to read down the points for you real swift to save you some time. 1, know when to go. Early or late, spoiler alert. Number 2, know where to sit, again, spoiler alert, at the bar. 3, don't linger, saying you should be in and out in under 90 minutes. That is the advice that Eater gives. They even talk about not bringing a like super big book to read at the bar. You should just kind of, if you're going to bring a book, bring a small one, read a chapter, get in, get out. It also says be gracious for number 4. Number 5 is be a regular, and number 6 is bring your friends. The second article even goes as far as to mention Ichiran, a Japanese restaurant chain where, quote, guests sit at individual walled booths and a ticket system ensures minimal interaction with servers. According to Hiroshi Kokubun, marketing coordinator for Ichiran USA, the concept was originally designed to, quote, let our customers focus on our ramen without worrying about their surroundings, end quote. There is another aspect to eating out that I totally relate to. Chicago chef Ryan McCaskey also pays particular attention to people eating alone in his 2-star Michelin restaurant Acadia. Quote, but his initial motives for doing so weren't entirely about the customer. He says, you freak out because you think it's a Michelin inspector or Forbes or somebody reviewing us. So we want to pay extra attention to those solo diners, end quote. And totally, we would freak out so hard if a well-dressed single international diner came to eat at the restaurant I worked at in Norway. It was just always assumed we were getting reviewed. So it's just funny to hear that perspective from another chef. McCaskey now saying that he does not do special treatment as much anymore, but I still think it's funny to hear. Next up, a story from Ben Leventhal, who is a serial entrepreneur, and he is the owner of Resy, which is an app that partnered with Airbnb a few months ago and seeded 28 million diners in 125 cities in the US in 2017. It is an article he published on Medium talking all about technology in restaurants. So, of course, you know I had to cover this. I love my technology. He starts off by talking about change and restaurants' ability to embrace change, to adapt to what it's like to own a place in 2019, 2021, 2023. So the points are, drum roll, data. third revenue channel, meaning just not to have a dining room and catering, but a third revenue stream. That's why I talk about things like content and sponsorships and packaged food and all that stuff that we've talked about before on this channel. The 360-degree feedback loop, which basically means leaving an articulated review from the guest on all aspects, from lighting to music to pace to price, combined with A/B testing and context from the restaurant. It's not really that specific, but he mentions it in the article. Point number 4 is unbundling of demand, using the example of Dominique Crenn, a chef in San Francisco, who we also covered on the show before, partnering with American Express to reserve tables for Amex cardholders. At the end of the article, they talk about 2 other points. The end of cash is number 5, and number 6 is the importance of the repeat customer. So for any of you that watch Shark Tank, they talk a lot about customer acquisition costs. The article says, quote, "Simply put, the longer a restaurant can retain a customer, the lower the per meal cost of acquiring that customer becomes. The more profitable that customer becomes to the restaurant in turn." So how is this part about technology? It used to be that software only helped a restaurant earn a customer at booking. Now, because new software exists to manage and enhance every milestone along the customer journey from discovery to feedback to rebooking, the process of turning new customers into regulars is finally scalable, end quote. So overall, super interesting, just pieces that I'm paying attention to. I don't think there were real kind of like actionable points for anyone to implement into their business right away. A lot of it is definitely for people to click on that article to be aware that Resy is a company that's keeping all of these points in mind as they're developing their software. It is a marketing piece in layman's terms. But overall, just something that I enjoyed reading. Again, I don't have any huge takeaways for you guys on it, especially if you don't own a place and you are in the tech software business. But yeah, I just like covering these pieces because I like paying attention to it and knowing exactly what these trends are. Quickie story, real quick. Belinda Long, who is the owner of Bee Patisserie, friend of my friend Hubert, is expanding like crazy. She's starting a San Francisco mochi company, and she's expanding Bee Patisserie to Korea. So she's going to have a location in Seoul. Just talking about her shop really makes me want a kouign-amann. Her stuff is amazing. It is just a really great example of getting good at one thing really well. She started off basically just doing her kouign-amanns and chocolate kouign-amanns, and then expanding slowly, building a community, and looking at where the demand is, and then just focusing on her and what she does best, and not really caring about what other people think. The flavors, by the way, at her Mochi Mochi pop-up include horchata, baklava, Boston cream, berry cream cheese, and chocolate almond. So that's currently only in the pop-up phase. She's looking to expand that into a brick-and-mortar location eventually. So last up, a question from you guys. I guess it's several questions. If one of you guys wants to name this section of the show, I would love to have there be a kind of semi-sarcastic, tongue-in-cheek name for this Q&A section of the show. A little bit of a play on the emulsion, if you can think of something creative. But shout out to Oscar Castaño. Hi, my name is Oscar _ on Instagram. He's currently backpacking in South America and has some questions about staging. So I'm going to attempt to rapid fire these at my horribly slow and very specific rapid fire pace. So let's get into it. He says, we're landing in Boston and probably be there for a month. Is there a restaurant in Boston that you recommend me to stage? I do not have any recommendations in Boston. I was supposed to go in November of last year, but I never made it. I have a couple of friends who are from there, but I don't have any recommendations for you to stage. If anybody that's listening right now is either in Boston or has any recommendations in Boston, I 100% recommend that you leave those in the comments so Oscar can find them and figure out where he should want to go stage. He says, as I told you before, I'm not traveling with my knives. Would that be okay if I show up with no knives? Or do you think the Victorinox you covered on your video would do the job? You have 2 choices. If you're cool with just buying it and just leaving it behind, you can totally like Amazon Prime 2 Victorinox knives to wherever you're staying in whatever city you're in, and then just use those knives for the stage. Because they're probably still going to be sharp the whole day of whatever you use them. They'll probably be okay for all the stage work that you're going to have to do. And then you don't really worry about it because it's like 50 bucks of knives. You just get rid of them or gift them to some cook at the restaurant. Just say like, hey, I bought these. Or could you just hold on to them for me when I come back if you want to come back or whatever. I also mentioned this very specifically in a YouTube comment to Oscar, I think, that as long as you make it very clear to the restaurant before you arrive that you are traveling, you don't have any knives, you're going to need to borrow some. I have no doubt that whatever restaurant you stage at will actually be totally fine with you borrowing one of their cook's knives or the sous chef's knives or whatever. Where there's a problem is that if you just kind of show up day of and you're like, hey, by the way, I don't have any knives, that's kind of screwed up. If you in those emails that you're sending them, you just say, hey, by the way, I'm not going to have any knives because I can't take them on the airplane, so is there a chance that you guys might be able to borrow me some tools while I'm there? I have no doubt that in exchange for the free labor that you're giving them, they will let you use their tools. But that's just my advice. He says, any special skill you recommend I should develop if I want to make it into a Michelin star restaurant? There's a great book called Grit that you should read if you're really interested in getting that. It's called Grit. It's basically about perseverance and not caring what other people think. There's an intense amount of mental strength that is required to do well at a Michelin restaurant because there is a lot of high stress, pressure, that happens in these kitchens. So the faster that you can develop that mental toughness, the better off you're going to be, which is a skill. I definitely would categorize that as a skill. As far as like making an omelet or like whisking a hollandaise or whatever, I firmly believe that you can learn all of those techniques through trial and error. And if the restaurant expects you to perform at that level, and if you want it bad enough, you will learn the techniques that they're asking you to learn fast enough. So there isn't like a specific technique. You can just get faster, I guess, at setting up an organization. That's, again, why I mentioned that my prep list is so important. Organization and mental toughness is way more valuable than knife skills when it comes to being a line cook. So those are two things that I would really recommend you dive a little bit deeper into and grow those skills if you, quote, want to make it into a Michelin star restaurant. I know I probably won't make it to Alinea or Grace once I get to Chicago. Grace closed, bro. Don't you watch this show? He says, but I hope I can make it to a 1-star at least. He says, how does it feel working at Noma? Noma was, I don't know how it is now, but Noma was crazy. It was a lot of people. There was, I think, 14 of us stagiaires. I was there for a week or 2 weeks. It was a lot. You would show up. The first day, I think I showed up at 9 a.m., stayed until 1 in the morning. And then the line cook that I was paired up with was like, hey, do you want to show up at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning? Which is just nuts. So I was like, by the time you go home, you get 6 hours of sleep, you wake up, and you literally go straight back to the restaurant. It is a lot of hours. I feel like it's probably a little bit more sustainable now, but it was a lot of, what did we do? We opened scallops, we picked apart pickled rose petals, we cleaned celery root, cleaned moss, plated for some private events. I worked snack station for a little while. It feels cool to just be around people that are thinking about food in that way. The Saturday night projects that they did for a long time was fascinating. It was really, really cool to see all of that and the creativity that comes from people who are just like-minded like you, who just love fine dining restaurants, who really love the execution of nice food. It is definitely intense. But that was also back when Matt Orlando was chef de cuisine there, so that was a long time ago. I feel like that was right after I was at Per Se. What else does he ask? What was the best lesson or thing I'm thankful about working there? Some of the connections I made. I love that there's a couple of people that I still keep in touch with from that experience, even though it was just 2 weeks. The fact that you spend so much time together with these people, you spend like 100 hours a week with these people. Maybe not quite 100, but it's a lot of hours, so you get to make a lot of cool friends, especially on the stagiaire side. Thought it was really interesting. And everyone's there for the same reason. Like I said, it's just a bunch of like-minded people together, so it's really, really fun. How did I get there? Is there any downside about staging at a Michelin restaurant? If you don't like the work, it's gonna suck. That's just how it is. If you don't like cutting celery into tiny cubes, you're not really gonna enjoy it. Or if you don't actually like cooking all night long. That's what it is. You are a cog in a machine, and that is what you're expected to do. The restaurant wouldn't function the way that it did if everyone was a free-thinking organism. There has to be some sort of dictatorship in that kind of... I mean, think about like Cirque du Soleil, right? Like if Cirque du Soleil was just like every single person could just do whatever trick they wanted to do, it wouldn't be an orchestrated show. So you have to think about the fact that like whoever is running the show has everybody in a very specific place for a very specific reason. And that's how the machine continues to run like it does and consistently provide guests with good experiences. So once you wrap your head around that, if you can helicopter up and see that, then you can start to get a little bit of appreciation for the repetitive nature of the job sometimes. What's something you never do in a Michelin kitchen? I would never scumbag someone. I would never throw someone under the bus in the way of like blaming someone for something that I did. I'm very, very good at admitting when I did something wrong. Something I never do as far as like prep work, there isn't a lot. I've done a lot. I've cleaned out dumpsters. I've swept up guts. I've dealt with rotten fish. It's like there's a lot of stuff that I'm totally fine with. I don't really get grossed out that easily. But yeah, it's a relationship thing, right? Like you shouldn't scumbag people, man. That's just the main thing of it, right? Like it's a trust thing. And he says, sorry if there are too many. If you're able to just answer some of them, that'd be awesome. Cheers. Well, I hope that answered those questions. I'm grateful for you sending them to me, and I hope they provided you a little bit of value, and not just you, but all the other people listening. That's the whole point of me answering on this show. So to get into it, finally, our non-industry story of the week. If you guys like hip-hop, I just discovered this guy a couple weeks ago on YouTube named Dax. He played basketball forever, and he just changed careers to be in the rap game. He has been killing it on YouTube, doing diss tracks of other YouTubers, spitting straight fire on other popular songs' beats. I'm just a fan of his swagger and his confidence and how he does his videos, his kind of strategy on breaking out in this noisy world. I wish, folks, I could rap. I want to do a rap video someday, like a real rap music video. I want to write my own song, even if it's a cover to start, but I want to do a rap video someday. But if you like hip-hop, either when you prep or when you're commuting or when you're working out, check out Dax, D-A-X. I recommend starting with his Mask Off remix or his cover of Shape of You by Ed Sheeran. You can just thank me later after you listen to that. So with that, this has been episode 52 of The Emulsion. Thank you so much for listening. If you have stories you want covered on next week's show, shoot them to me on Twitter and hashtag The Emulsion so I can find them. I am super serious about this one. A lot of you send me Facebook message or an Instagram DM, but if you put it on Twitter and hashtag The Emulsion, that's where I search before I record the episode. My mind is like a goldfish. I will forget instantly if you send me a story and you don't put it on Twitter. So if you really do want it covered, even if you're commenting on YouTube, at me on Twitter, Justin_Khanna, and hashtag The Emulsion, then I can promise that your story will get in the episode. So, subscribe to this podcast if you aren't already. Definitely leave a thumbs up on this video if you're watching there, or consider reviewing this on iTunes 5 stars. If you listen there, regardless of where you are, I appreciate your ears, so thank you so much. My name's Justin Khanna. Have a good one. So many comments, guys. You guys are killing it. How does the culinary education work in the U.S.? I will get to that in a second. Oscar, you're here. I'm so glad you got to hear all my answers to your questions. Crazy how food has to have a type. Good food is just that good. Yes, I'm cool. Thanks, Ernesto. Love Headspace. Headspace is dope. Come back to NorCal. I want to. My only friends, well, not my only friends, some of my best friends who lived in NorCal are moving to New York City, so that's kind of lost my biggest reason to go visit NorCal. Do the rounds. 42 grams, the story about it was awesome, calling out 2 stars and getting it so easily. I was so surprised. 42 grams changed how I plan to store and set up food. Those plastic containers are a fantastic idea. That's definitely restaurant style-y, Thomas. Glad you got that piece of insight. First time I got in on live, yes. The edit tells the story, not the chefs in these movies. So the funniest part about that is that the friend that I was joking about 42 grams with actually told me that the chef was apparently put in a good light in the documentary, and he was way worse in real life. Michelin is about money and location. In a certain aspect, yes. Love curly-headed Alex. Yes, that's true. Spencer Queenyamon is exactly right. They are amazing. How does culinary education work in the U.S.? Name two. Tell me where you're from, and I can give you a more specific answer. The culinary school I went to was 2 years. It was 1 year of book knowledge and cooking, and there was a 6-month externship where we went out in the real world and cooked. And then the second year was a little bit more book knowledge and more cooking. If you wanted to stay on at my school, which was the Culinary Institute of America, for another 2 years, they would give you restaurant management degree, I believe, which was amazing if you wanted to go into either hotels or these larger restaurants that are kind of like turn and burn kind of restaurants. But if you want to go into fine dining, there wasn't a ton of stuff that I saw as valuable, and it was a decision that I made to kind of get what I needed from the school, get my education, and then move on and get some real-world experience. So that is definitely where I learn best. I learn best with doing, not so much reading. I remember I read about making hollandaise in like 6 different cookbooks, and then the first time I made hollandaise was just such a crash and burn because I didn't know exactly what was happening in the bowl. So I personally learn more by doing, so I prefer industry experience over culinary education. Or culinary school education, I should say. But that's just me. There's a lot of people here now, more than normal. But and I say a lot, it's only like 11 people. But anyways, does anybody else have any other questions? Anything I can help you guys with in this little? Oh, what's up, Jack? I'm glad you made it. Yeah, if there's any other questions that you guys have, I would love to answer them. Otherwise, I am currently editing a video all about a pop-up that we did few months back. That is gonna go live hopefully tonight. If I'm being more realistic, probably tomorrow. But I'm basically breaking down how a pop-up that we did went last year, because a lot of you guys have been asking me questions about pop-ups. No more questions? No more questions? Okay, guys, I really appreciate you tuning in. I'm Spencer, if you're still here, we got to schedule our podcast interview, dude. I would love to have you guys listen to Spencer. He used my stagiaire template email. 2-week stage is totally fine. Absolutely ask for a 2-week stage if you can. You just need to be very specific with your dates. Don't beat around the bush about it. Just tell them, like, hey, I want a stage for 2 weeks. Is that possible? Perfect. Spencer's feeling better. Best skills to have in a kitchen or restaurant. Jack, we just answered this, man. Where were you? I said something along the lines of mental fitness, mental toughness, and organization are way more beneficial than knife skills, which is really hard to hear because you can't go out and buy a new brain. I know you just got here. You can't go out and buy a new brain. You can't reorganize how you think about your life, but that's why experience is so valuable. So anyways, I'm going to be interviewing Spencer. He is 13 years old. He lives in Minnesota, and he used my stagiaire email template to get a stage at Spoon and Stable, which is a fantastic restaurant out in Minneapolis. And he staged, and they killed it. They want to have him back again. So I'm super, super proud of him for that happening. It's like a real-world case study for the content I'm putting out. So I'm super happy to see some real results from you guys. I'm always happy to hear that you guys are getting some value from what I'm putting out. So he's going to be on the show. We're going to talk all about his pop-ups in his house that he's doing and kind of his ambitions and what he's thinking about as a kind of a 13-year-old chef. And he's going to be asking me some questions. So again, this is going to be some more tactical advice for you guys. So that will hopefully be episode 53 when we schedule that up. If there's no more questions, I'm going to bounce. Do I use a thermometer to check temps on proteins or the cake tester only? I never grew up with temp thermometers. Cake tester and just slicing it open and seeing what happens is kind of the best way to do it. I would suggest you go buy like a 5-pound pack of chicken breasts and just practice cooking them, searing them, grilling them, doing like butter basting, and just spend an entire day, invite all your friends over, make like a potato salad and just make hella chicken breast and just practice. That's just the best way. And you can cross-reference with a thermometer, right? Like you can like stick a thermometer in, see that it's cooked, feel what that feels like. Also stick the cake tester in, test it on your lip or on your wrist, and then, after only then you slice it open and see what that looks like, and then do it over and over and over again. At a restaurant, you actually have the luxury of like cooking for 60, 80, 90 people a night, so you can actually see what it looks like over and over again, and you'll learn really fast because you're gonna have to redo it if it's not good. But if you're just at home, definitely just buy a big giant Costco pack of chicken breasts, and that's it. Everyone used cake testers at Spoon and Stable. Totally. That's how it goes. It's faster. It's just faster than a thermometer. It's faster, and it's a little bit more tactile, and it doesn't bruise the meat as much. A lot of times, like, restaurants are working with really, really tiny cuts of meat, whether it's like a torchon of something or I don't know, whatever. It's a small piece of beef. Sticking a giant probe thermometer into it is not the preferred method to check, because then it gets sent out to the table with a giant hole in it. So the cake tester is very uninvasive. But anyways, that's going to be it for me, guys. I really appreciate you guys hanging out. I hope you got some value today. I will catch you guys in the next video. Oh, here's the thing. The Town Cutler video got demonetized, and the only way that I can have it be reviewed by YouTube is if we have 1,000 views on it, and there are currently, we're really close. Yeah, there's 724 views on it. So everybody that's watching, just go watch that Town Cutler video one more time. You don't even have to watch it all the way. Just let it play for 30 seconds and then X out of it. And then if we get to 1,000 views on it, then I can remove that ugly demonetized thing on it. But anyways, appreciate you guys. Have a good rest of your day. I don't know why it happened. YouTube's stupid. But they won't manually review it until the video has over 1,000 views. It's because I talk about knives. Next podcast, good question. Me and Spencer are going to be emailing, and I will put it out on Twitter, also on Instagram when that's going to be live. And I'm actually going to, I don't think we're going to shoot this one live. So it's really important that if you guys have questions for Spencer, or questions for me, you shoot them to me on Twitter for this next episode. But that's it. Hit that subscribe button. That's right here. It's like my face. And that's it. Talk to you guys in the next one. Adios.